you are the great. You tarry with the small. Love flows in and out, never giving up. You live within until within's without. Come set our souls afire, almost ancient today. I hear you calling. Our lives are longing. Sweet inspiration. Raise my expectations.
One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're in a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. You come on this radio show and you start saying incandescent things like that, you better have more behind you, pal, than just your thumb. I've been listening to talk radio for years, and one thing I just can't stand is when the host has to, push his way onto people, beat the callers into his way of thinking, extending his ego, or when the callers call in and say something so outrageous and the host lets it go unchallenged. The sign you're on the road to truth is the lack of contradiction. You want to find truth, you just don't simply believe somebody because of their authority or their degree, or you listen to what they say, you test it against reality, and you hold their feet to the fire. All right, we're back and we're live. Feet to the fire. I'm your host, James Zalthayenchik, Black Knight, Talk Radio. Welcome. I've been gone for a little while. All this stuff was going on. It was. I don't want to use the word getting to me. It was overloading me, distracting me, which I think is, of course, the point of it all, is to overwhelm you with fear, anger, resentment of what's going on and how the media is being manipulated, or is manipulating, propagandizing people, putting the small groups who are causing the trouble to corral people the way they're going up front and blowing it up as big as life, keeping off the stage those who are doing the right thing or coming up with actual problems, explanation of problems that they show the problems, to show what's going on, the reality of it, and keeping the false desired narratives running. And you would write a story or share a story, give an opinion on it, and show the critically thought reality aspects of it. And then to have people, I mean, it's people you've known for years, who you thought was smart. I mean, well, they are smart. It's just they're deluded somehow. And their arguments would prove it, because they would go off on tangents and irrelevances and use name calling and third rail. You know, third rail has the high voltage on the they call it the L in Chicago, but the subway and whatnot. And if you step on that, of course, you disappear, you die. So these are third rail topics. When you touch them, you're electrocuted or you're tar babied. You know, racism, anti-Semitism, and so forth. And so it. I just as of last week, 2 weeks ago, I think it was last Sunday, I was doing a prep session for the show, and I just had this inside leading just to stop. I didn't write anything saying there was going to be no show. I just disappeared for a week, literally. And I stayed away from all social medias, all types. I did get emails, so in case, a war was declared, I would know about it. And I did a lot of introspection, and I did a lot of listening to Jesus' words on the books, on tape of the Bible that I have. Just listening to it as I was driving. I have it in my phone. And I just did some soul searching, and in that time period, I got a call from my buddy's kid, who is like a nephew to me. He calls me uncle. That my buddy from the 80s had passed away. And that really hammered me. It's funny, I could not talk with the guy for a couple of years, a year maybe, 6 months, and I pick up where we left off like nothing. And he's dead. He's gone. And when I went to the services on Saturday, it just totally ripped a hole in my heart. I couldn't even say anything at the service on his behalf, which is embarrassing, but I just was distraught. And I've been thinking the last couple days, about things. And I sat down and I wrote something, and I decided to go live with it. The phrase is called entropy. And in physics, let me just say there's several aspects of it. The point I'm looking at, I put the definition down: lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder. And that's what I'm looking at, is that the entropy in the universe, the 3D universe, is toward breaking down to the lowest energy state. That is the force of the universe. That is what is forcing everything down. What has happened is, and I'm just going to read this because I wrote it down and it sounded nice. I'm not a good sight reader, but God called out of the void. He called out of the void. He called the universe out of the void. Its existence is maintained by God holding back, as it were, the forces of entropy. That is the void's natural effect to break down all things to its purest energy state, which is null. As entropy progresses, the creations within the void are subject to irresistible forces of decay. Only God's intervention keeps those forces at bay, progressing at a galactic snail pace. Now, examples of entropy is when a tree falls over and dies, and then you have the microbes and little insects eat it up. Those insects are part of the machinery of entropy that are breaking things down, which, of course, eventually those insects would die, and their material would be left. Everything eventually would collapse into the black hole, I don't know, white hole, whatever you want to call it, all those things. This is the view that atheists have, that the explosion of Big Bang is, I don't know, we'll call it a freak arrangement, and all this stuff is out here, and now it's all going back down. But I do think entropy is true, and I think that God moved across the void, called into existence into this void, which he created the void. It's like a virtual reality box, the void is. And he put in the programming, but all the while the tug of the entropy is breaking against everything. It's like water breaking against the granite shoreline. Eventually it wears it down. And it's supposed to. And what God has done is intervened in this void, what created our universe in the void, and is pushing back against the waves. Over time, but there is an allowance of entropy. It does creep forward. People do grow old and die. Things do disintegrate. Some take very long times. I use the word granite. Some take a very long time. Some take great reactions with items inside the universe, which breaks them down. You know, collision of bodies, I don't know, whatever. So this is the natural flow, the natural existence of the void, and God reaching into the void and separating out. You know, in fact, one of the things in physics is they've noticed that if you study an area of vacuum, all of a sudden they have had registered two particles appear. There's a positive and negative. They appear for, nanoseconds, and then they recombine. Well, they say recombine. It sounds like the state of nothingness breaks into two pieces, which has some type of entropic values, which then meet one another and annihilate itself. And so this, I think, is an example of the mechanism of the void. So what is happening? God goes in and creates heaven and earth. In the 3D, we'll call it the 3D void. Now, I'm sure there's more dimensions to it and all that, but come on, I'm just going to make it kind of simple. I got Shane is in the chat room here. You come into the Spreaker chat room if you'd like. So that's kind of the way it is, and the way it's said, just like, and I came up with this idea because I have. I get these certain leadings inside, and if I listen to them, especially if I'm paying attention or if I'm in a semi-reflective state, it leads me to do things. One of the things that I have been thinking about is I haven't ate meat in many years, but having certain kind of meats for my personal health reasons. I don't know if there's something wrong and I need it. I don't know, but it's very sad because I don't want to eat animals. I don't want to steal their work, their life, and do it. And what came to me when I was pondering this is this a concept of entropy, is that the design of this earth is people die, things die, other things have developed a system to use the carcasses or kill them and use them. I'm not happy about it, but I'm pursuing that line of thought. But along that line of thought of entropy, what I see happening now, because I'm looking around at the news stuff, and it's just crazy stuff that 10 years ago people would not have taken, not have accepted. Maybe it was in there, and no one had the guts to do it, and once the dam opened up, then, let's see how crazy, how illogical, irrational, and uncritically thought we can do, and at the same time, the negative entity power, how we could use that to enslave Earth. Again, the devil, Satan, would be a tool of entropy as well, and it's being held back by God for purposes of demonstration, to quote less visible, and also to allow people to grow. And I think what happens in a state of growing entropy is the reality of the material creation. And again, it's also spiritual. So, I don't know I'm going to call it 3D creation, and just bear with me. the 3D world, the world we're in, the reality we're in, that the realness of it is tested. So when you have plenty of metaphors in the Bible talking about gold burning off in the crucible, burning off the impurities, becoming purest gold, and so forth. Lay up your treasures in heaven where they don't rust, and so on. So the reality of what is being created here by God's mechanism is people becoming more like God. So when the entropy takes over their body, their spirituality goes on. It's an infinite creation. Entropy cannot take that part of it. But the quality of that part is going to be what you've done in this entropic universe. And there's also ideas about if you've not done anything like the weeds, separate the weeds from the wheat and the tares. The tares are brought up and burnt in the barn. They're burnt, not in the barn, in a fire, because this is entropy taking its effect. Now, the good wheat is planted in the earth, and it counteracts entropy, and it grows into a new plant, which then creates more seeds, which counteracts entropy. When you put them in the ground, they don't rot and die. They grow. There is that spark of anti-entropy, the Spirit of God that's in it, and it grows. So right now, I look around, and how I would explain now, and it makes sense to me, what is going on in the world is we have a speeding. You've heard Art Bell mention the quickening. There's a quickening of entropy in its force, breadth, and speed. And you might say there's a withdrawal of the intervention of the Spirit against entropy. And what will happen is, this is the crucible that will burn up the wheat from the chaff, and the wheat which will go on and be replanted in another field and continue to grow. Now, I'm not going to get too metaphysical in it, and not metaphysical, too, what's the word, doctrinal and everything. What about hell and all that? I'm not going to go into all of this stuff, because that is a distraction from the point that we're in now. We're seeing everybody going crazy. We're seeing mental illness run wild as becoming natural. You have, I don't know, what is it, 40 genders. You have people are allowed to burn down and take over private property and buildings because they're expressing the problem with systematic racism, which in this country, if there's systematic racism, there wouldn't be any. It would be, I guess, if it was white supremacy, it'd be all whites running everything, and it's not. So, I mean, I'm not going to go down into that delusion, diversion. I want to stay up in looking at what's going on and what we can do. What we need to do right now is to use this moment of advancing entropy for our own personal cleaning, so that when the entropic forces enter our life and start to tear things down, like the death of a loved one, changing in lives, friendships dissolving because of these political, which is really spiritual divides. You have to use this time to look at yourself and solidify yourself in God's bubble from the effects, the spiritual effects of entropy. You don't want to go crazy and kill people and little stuff which will affect your spiritual seeds in the next planting. And this is what Satan wants to do. Now, people argue there's no Satan. Satan's a reptilian race. I don't care. The force is obviously here. Whether it's Satan is intricately a part of entropy, a result of a being who has given over to the entropic spiritual forces and has now become a negative being, which is aiding and abetting the destruction of higher energy forces. You want to break down, like a house, for example, lower energy state of a house, say it burns up, it burned off energy, which goes off into the universe and now it's a crumpled piece, which is more easily dealt with for the next levels of absorption and decay. In fact, I did a show a long time ago. I'm going to see if I can find it, where a guy was on talking about this entropy. And he was not religious whatsoever. Is that we're all agents of the entropy to bring it down to destruction of the universe. So I'm thinking of what he's saying could be the Satan's part. It could be that aspect of, the whole point of the whole universe is to bring everything back down to nothing, which would be a negative entity's perspective. One who doesn't like God's creation would then put all efforts into destroying it. And you could see spiritually what is, in physically, what's being done. That people are destroying themselves. I mean, literally, as far as suicide, literally. And they're destroying themselves in terms of creation, what they could have done, harming people or not helping who they could have, and harming themselves. And this is all part of the negative entropy of the void, which we're in the middle of in the midst of, separated dark from light. If you look at Genesis and you read that about when moved across the void and, separated the darkness from the light and all that, you could see this God intervening into this virtual reality box created, that its automatic response is to destroy everything in it. So God intervenes in it, opens up this stuff, and then the pressure of the entropy is the testing of the real spiritual creation. It also firewalls, if you will, the rest of creation, whatever, firewalls it from getting out, breaking out, and moving on. It reminds me of, I didn't see the new movie, but the one with Harrison Ford with the robots. I can't think of the name of it right now. It'll come to me. The creation of those androids were limited by they would stop. It was nothing to stop it from stopping. And at the end of that particular movie, the guy who was killing all the humans out of jealousy, when it came down to that moment, did not kill Ford because he realized how precious life was in that last moment before he died. And it's kind of an interesting movie. But the idea being is that there is a firewall built in that all things will die. And when Jesus talks about you won't die without ever everlasting life, it's not a contradiction. It is the aspect of our goal of life is not physical. It's a temporary part of our growth. And it's like being born out of physical life into spiritual life solely. Taking off, I look at entropy in a way as taking off the training wheels of life. The earth, the 3D entropic universe is this training wheels. There's laws of nature. There's limits to what we can do, limits in speed, how far we can go, how strong you can be, how long you can live. All these things have the limits that are built in by the entropic universe, which is why, another reason why the ideas of downloading your consciousness into machines is ridiculous. I mean, the consciousness is so complicated and beyond cataloging in a computer. I mean, the best that's possible is to make a what do they call that? The phrase for it. Like an AI mimicking copy of the person, which won't be perfect, but to me or you talking to that person, if there's enough interreaction through history, like chess, they can figure out what probable responses would be. It might work to some degree, but it's not them, and they're gone. And those people who step into the machine, which will obviously have to kill them to properly read them, is going to be the fine print. This is where Satan gets his victory. Another destroyed, another deluded, destroyed. And of course, they wake up on the other side like, what? So when I started looking at things with this entropic model, things make more sense. I mean, I know people are deluded, and a lot of people want to have power, so they're going along with BLM and other vehicles of power And those people are being used by other people of higher power, which will then throw them out like a used tissue when they're done, if it ever, when that point comes. I mean, I understand all of that. But it also is like, there's kind of this, well, why is this being allowed to happen? I mean, if it was in my house, I wouldn't allow my kids or what have you to do something, do these things or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't allow it being, I don't know, the authority of the house or however you want to say it. And yet God allows it. But I see when I look at the bigger picture, God wants us to be like God. And the clues are in the old Bible verses. When Adam and Eve, actually Eve chose to eat the apple, she was deceived by lust of wanting to be like God. And Adam was deceived by his loyalty to Eve. I mean, in this, again, I'm looking at it as a Aesop's fable or a reality. It doesn't matter. The lesson is there, and it does matter. And the choice was we want to know the difference between good and evil. It's not knowledge that was sought, which is what the lie is told by atheists and others and humanistic atheists. It wasn't that God didn't want us to have knowledge. Is God suggested that we eat from the tree of life and not go into that text deal of the difference between good and evil. And what's unreeling and unraveling before us over the centuries has been us seeing the difference between good and evil. And the entropic effect always brings back the destruction. Because the goal here is not to have like heaven on earth, which is the New Age type of a lie. We're not all good people, just have to get rid of this stuff. We're all essentially good. No, we are all entropically driven down to barbarians. It shows it throughout history over and over again. You have the high society, which then gets stale and then starts having things like child trafficking and whatnot and perversions, and it ends up falling apart, and the barbarians come and take it in. And then it starts over again. And we're going into another one of these cycles. Now, maybe it's selfish, but I would like it to be the final cycle when this whole thing is over with, and that no more people are going to be presented into this environment. Now, again, not being God, that could be kind of a dumb statement. God could say, it's a great thing. You know how many people, how advanced and how growth and how on the right track has come in from this whole earth thing? And I'm hoping so. I mean, I'm glad I'm not in charge. That's all I got to say. So when I look at this is what I want to do with this show, too, is look at this kind of stuff. I don't want to go into talking about the events of the week. Well, this one did that, this one did that. Because what you're doing is you're getting sucked down onto the manipulative playing field and keeping your eyes low instead of looking high. My goal is not to have like a peaceful and happy United States or world, for that matter. That's not my goal. I like it. It'd be nice if it happens. It's not my goal. My goal is to know God and be like God as best I can, in spite of the entropic forces and the, and you can look at it too in the idea of sin in humans is a pressure in there as well. And if you've had a bad upbringing, your parents had problems or whatever, that's pushed on you. You have what's going on out there pushing on you. You have this forces of non-goodness wanting to tear you down, and yet people get through it. You have a family where you'll have one kid goes along with the parental negativity, satanic rituals, abuse, sexual abuse, whatever. They become the next generation of that. And then you'll have a person in there who gets out of that. They may get out of it tough. It might be rough. There might have scars and things around it. They got out of it, though. That's huge, huge. What force fought that entropy in that family? God. God within that person. That person is being groomed, and using the word groom, for godliness. So when that person passes, they will shed off the things that are built into the physical body, the wounds and the traumas that are in the brain, the physical body of it, and the spirit that resides with that brain moves on, and the peace, all that stuff's gone. But what stays is the realness that one has created. The ultimate victory of entropy is the revealing of the butterfly from the chrysalis. The ultimate failure of entropy is that something great exists after its crushingness, after its dissolvingness. And this is where you look at, this is why I don't get too dogmatic. I used to be very dogmatic about it, being a fundamentalist Baptist, very dogmatic about it until I did a lot of real studying where I allowed the lack of contradiction to be the guide, not what particular discipline I want to follow. Stuff started making sense because instead of having it compartmentalized in little pieces and arrangements, and then taking that model and laying it on the world and making it fit or rejecting what doesn't, I allowed the model to form. And what I've got is more of principle structures that are not malleable, but they apply to all things in all times. So that whether it's a human being or in some other universe with another, other races there, and I don't know, they look like whatever. It doesn't matter. Those spiritual principles are timeless and universal. And we're learning the version of it through our world, in spite of the entropic pressure, in spite of whether it be influence from interdimensional beings, demons, or whether they're what was the Freud term? Not Freud. The other guy. Archetypes. Whether it be archetypes within the matter structure that have a common descriptor, it doesn't matter. The effects are real, and the results from following the principles of God, fantastically told by Jesus in terms that we can apply to all cultures. By following that, the effects of the entropy, effects of Satan, the effects of other people going nuts, whatever, it doesn't touch your soul. That's the point right now. You don't follow the stuff that's going on in the world like it's the most important thing. I mean, it's important. I could be refusing to take a mandatory vaccination and like losing everything, going to some camp somewhere. I mean, it's really possible. I'm not happy about it at all, let me tell you. But the one saving hope I have in all of this is, unlike other people at other times, perhaps, I really think we are in the latter times. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You got to do what you got to do, and maybe you'll die in it, and it doesn't matter because you won't actually. Maybe it's near, but but my point is that you got to do what you got to do because you're talking about eternity. You're talking about life that goes on, and not only goes on, but it expands beyond your wildest dreams. When people talk about seeing heaven and the prophets, they say this paving street of gold and all kinds of jasper and jade and all this. Those are their way of saying, in their particular descriptors and how it appeared to them, is the most fantastic thing they can come up with. Now, thanks to science fiction and and CGI and everything, we might have a more fantastic possible view of it. But even that will pale because the reality of it outside of this limited entropic universe that is seeded and seasoned with sin and evil and all this other stuff, that those negative entropic powers, outside of that is beyond our imagination. I mean, I've had some dreams, excuse me, that I think gave me views of it. But as I started to wake up, because sometimes I would wake up slowly, and I would be able to glimpse into this stuff which is beyond understanding long enough so that my subconscious or my consciousness, whatever, is trying to convert it into something I can understand. But for that moment when I'm on both sides, I gotta go, wow. If you ask me to describe it, I can describe it, but when I say it, I go, man, that's not even, I mean, that's like an insult, so to speak, to what I actually have a glimpse of. And it's happened a few times. Does that mean it's true? No, I think it is. I mean, I take this stuff seriously because we are spiritual beings, and the fact that we sleep 1/3 of our life means there's something going on there. And if you don't sleep, you die, literally. So there's a lot of things tied to sleep that we don't even understand, but we can see some of the effects of not sleeping. So this is what I'd like you to look at. I mean, who am I? This is just throwing stuff out there. If it sticks, fine. But I'd like you to look at what's going on, take a step back, and look at it as like a chemical reaction. Only this is the universe, the entropic universe action. You know, it's like when you take something that's fighting the tidal forces of entropy and those forces start to close in on it, that being, that person is not going to survive. It's going to go back to the void. But what pops out, let's say, pops out on the other side, is a new created or a newly more advanced spiritual being, which can now move about with even more creative ability in the larger spiritual world. This is what I think if you want to read about the kingdom of heaven, the actual phrase, the kingdom of heaven is like, blah, blah, blah. The kingdom of heaven is not heaven versus hell. And I did a writing of it even back when I was in a Baptist church on this concept, which was, not exactly, people just like rather not think about it because they think, Jesus, the fire escape from hell, boom, you're in, and, that's it. And there's a quality of afterlife that does matter, how you do and grow here. So when we do these things that Jesus talked about, the principles, and grow it, we grow this. It'd be, let's say it's a muscle. Say you start working out, doing curling for your biceps. You work out, some people like it, and that's good for them. People do like to do stuff that's good for them. Other people don't. So, but as you do this, your muscle grows. Now you can lift more, You be able to do things you couldn't do before working out. And so when you do a spiritual workout, when you see what Jesus says, his principles, when someone asks for your shirt, give them your cloak as well. That doesn't mean you got somebody asks you for your shirt, you give them your coat. Someone says your shoes, you go, that doesn't count. It's not in the plan. The principle there is someone asks help from you, help them even more than they asked. Go the extra mile. Walk 1 mile, go 2. It doesn't mean you have to make it. No, I got to go 2, not just 1. I got to drag you along another mile. These are the spiritual principles that when someone, you forgive 7 times 7. I mean, you go on. That's why you read Jesus' stuff. I'm telling you, if you just read Jesus' teachings, not even the narratives, and Jesus said, boom. You just read those things. The red letters, I guess, is one way to get a Bible with red letters. Fantastic stuff. It will, you follow that, you, how would I call it? That the religious terms, you submit your life to Christ and all this other stuff. They got to make it into this power domination stuff. And what I like to put it now, and it's not ego, because I did submit myself to Christ in the power domination area. I mean, I was, I did it. But a better way to describe it now is if you go walk along with him, walk with me. And for my burden is light. Follow the principles of Jesus, sign on with him. I prayed and asked Jesus to come into my heart and all that stuff. I did all that. And I think a way to look at it is that when you sign on with him spiritually, he's there with you, sending the helper, which is they call the Holy Spirit, to actually go inside, come from the inside, from over there, comes from the inside into you and helps you grow better than if you did it yourself. In fact, the amount you can do is saving, going on to the next level and not having to fall to entropy in the lower forms. So and I don't like to talk too much doctrine because you could turn people off. I had a longtime friend who was a band member, saw a band I saw back in the 90s in Indianapolis. Christian band. They were kind of a gothic Christian band. And what you heard me say on one of my shows, that I didn't go along with the concept of the rapture, at least how it's told by some people. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't resurrection. I'm not even saying there won't be a rapture, but I just don't like how it's packaged doctrinally. She was so upset, deleted me, never listened, never heard from her again. It's got that rapture's got nothing to do with Jesus and following his plan. I mean, what if you die before the rapture comes? It doesn't matter then? Is believing in the rapture important if you're going to die prior to the rapture? You know what I'm saying? And this is why I get nervous with Q, because Q sounds like another rapture deal. You got to have faith. Believe in Q. No. This is why I stick with Jesus' principles he taught in the Bible is number one. Everything is subservient to it. When I look at the disciples like Paul, who is the author of the Christian church, he's the one that started the church. The principles of the church are Paulian concepts, right? I look at Paul as subservient to Jesus. Jesus was the master. So whatever Jesus talks first has higher as you put it out. And that's why another reason I get in trouble with more of a fundamentalist approach. And remember, I came from that. I've listened to the Bible a million times on tape. I wore the tapes out. I got the tapes. I still have them in there. I had to rebuy tapes. And then they invented CDs, So I'm with it. But I understand the principles that Jesus talked about. And when men get along with it, in fact, I don't have it with me. I left my laptop in the other room. But I've started to go through listening to the New Testament, Jesus' words, and certain phrases are popping out, and I'm copying them, and I'm going to start putting them out, just the phrases. Because a lot of you don't get in church because it doesn't necessarily fit neatly into the doctrines. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with church. A lot of people who are in church are being helped, sometimes in spite of the church, and they have a relationship with Jesus is the one who's really taking care of them in there. What about the Jews? What about that? Look, this is my deal here, so that's all I can say. I'm not going to argue with other things. I'm just offering my stuff. And that's why I like to keep it more philosophical rather than doctrinal, because then people start beating each other over the head. But going back to my original idea, we have entered the time of revelation, revealing of what is real. And it's resistant to entropy in the long term, life after death, for example. And we've also entered the final time of repentance. Now, I came up with a term, and I could not remember it. It wasn't repentance. Time of choice. So what is happening is things are being revealed. Look at the Epstein stuff, right? Not as a choice you can make. If people who were involved with the Epstein stuff would stand forward, for example, and say, yes, I did it was wrong, and name names and Turner's, that'll cover a lot of sin for what they did. When you confess your sins, when you confess the problem, when you come out and go, yeah, I was part of this negative entropy, and it's wrong, and I'll take whatever comes from it. I got to go to prison, I'll go to prison. I got to go killed, I'll get killed. But I'm going to make a stand right now. It was been revealed. I see it. I accept it. I repent from it. And I accept whatever entropy has to hit because of it. That is soul-saving stuff. And that is God working in the individual. If you're out there and you are in the throes of some big thing coming up that's going to destroy your life as you know it, it's best to take that approach, because no matter what happens here, you're talking about clearing a conscious cleanness that God will be able to fill in now to get through it. How many people have heard people conversions in prisons, and these people are happy? And they'd like to get out of the prison, but they totally understand it, and they're happy. That's the Spirit of God that resists all understanding. It doesn't make sense, but it's true. And this is the kind of stuff we need right now, because it's going crazy out there. Absolutely crazy. I'm 63. My entire life, nothing has come close to this. The most tumultuous times in the 60s, cakewalk. So we need to hold on to that, reach in, embrace, and love. And when entropy works, we're in the crucible and stuff, and some chaff starts burning off, let it burn off. Don't excuse it. Relax. I mean, none of it necessarily has to come out in the open and be shamed in public. I mean, it may come to it. I'm just saying, but the point is, don't, let it go. Let it burn off. And because the area outside of the entropy, that universe, which is huge, we're outside of the virtual reality void box, is huge. And what can you do there? I can't even tell you. It's stuff that you can't even conceive of. I'll just give one thing. When I was there, when I started waking up, I perceived myself doing many things at once, and I don't mean like taking a break and doing something. I mean simultaneously, multiple places at once, and I was able to see all of it and feel it all as if it's me right now. Say you're there right now, right? You're in your own skin and all that. Just imagine being three places at once doing the same thing, or doing different things, but being able to. And the only part that I really remember, and I guess it was the part that could get my mind to understand it, is I was looking at myself. I was kind of running, and I'm looking back at myself, and I'm seeing myself looking at myself. So I'm seeing me look at myself and me look at myself just for a second, and it was like, wow. And that's like nothing compared to what's going on out there. But it was just a taste of outside here-ness. And it's awesome. A lot of times music or art or something can move you outside of the here-now-ness, because it taps into that extra part of your soul that goes outside of the entropic universe. And out there is great stuff. I mean, this is where you had people like Tesla would dream and go to this place outside of the entropic universe, do this stuff, and then and he had the ability to be able to bring it back in, so to speak, kind of translate it down back into the entropic world. People talk about free energy device and all that. It's not going to happen. Time travel, not going to happen, because we're locked into this entropic universe for a reason. Because if you had free energy, you would create the free energy weaponry that would destroy everything. Anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's like a safeguard. So, anyway, going back to my last paragraph here, the final time of repentance or change, or to turn around, to take a different, go off that path that you're on to destruction. The choice to change and make a stand, especially if you can make a stand on it. If you just get out of it, that's fine. But if it gets in a position where you have to make a stand on it instead of avoiding it and going deeper and darker, which looks to me like these politicians are doing. They're going out and creating crazy stuff, probably got pictures, right? And them doing naughty stuff. I mean, really naughty stuff. So they have no choice. They're not going to come clean on it. They're not going to come make a stand. So they're going to do whatever they're told so they don't get ratted on. But I submit we make the choice to stand and make a change. I submit we may be seeing the withdrawal of God's spirit of intervention to allow natural entropy of the void, which separates God's reality from man's delusion. I think this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the wheat from the chaff. We're seeing these things that Jesus talked about. Now, maybe it's a cycle, and it'll go around another go around before it happens again, because it's happened many times. It hasn't been the final one. Maybe they are because of our technology and worldwide technology and how terrible things are. 900,000, I think the thing is, children go missing every year in America, I believe it was. Maybe it's 300,000. I believe it was 900,000. 300,000 is terrible. That means let's say 500,000 children disappear and never found. Not bodies, not a head in a forest preserve, skeleton, I mean, not a skeleton. Gone. Where did they go? I mean, it's like, well, they're consumed. Let's put it that way. In various ways. Some that do turn up on the street, drug addicts, prostitutes, or whatever, are the ones who are thrown out and survived. This is terrible stuff. Terrible stuff. So I think we've moved on. I think, to use the traditional biblical stuff, Satan has been thrown from heaven and he's on earth, and woe unto the earth because he's mad and his time is short. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing extra entropy. Satan and his minions are now here chewing away at it. We're seeing the universe get more active. So we might be going into a part of the universe which will cause more interaction in matter. Who knows? Maybe it's just energy levels from the negativity. Other people talk about that we're going through different waves, gravity waves or magnetic waves, and all that stuff's fine. It's interesting, but it's not really interesting because it doesn't matter. What matters is what's happening in your life, my life, right now, and what can we do about it. That's why I'm saying what has worked for me, and all I can do is be a witness in terms of what I have learned spiritually by following the teachings of Jesus, and know that no matter what happens, no matter how you go wrong, no matter what you do, God is always there. In fact, the gospel, it's interesting because the word gospel is used, which means good news or glad tidings. And the gospel has been, so it's like a word, and then now you can say, what does it mean? It can mean anything. Look at the OK sign now is supposed to be white supremacy, right? You can take a word or a sign and you can redefine it at some point. But the glad tidings is that God is here. God didn't go away. It's an illusion. It's a delusion. It is the world. It is the satanic forces. It is the spiritual and the entropy forces trying to destroy your spiritual connection, making you think that God is away. Oh, you're a sinner. God can't be here. God won't be around. Read Jesus' teachings. All the stuff we talked about. The person who is the sinner, who is a person who knows they're a sinner, and they can't raise their head up to heaven because they're so embarrassed of their sin. That is the one who goes home justified. God is here for us. Jesus did not come to heal us. He's not a physician for healing the healthy. He's come to save sinners. Now, I'm a sinner. I got no problem with it. There's no pride here. I've lived 63 years. I've done a lot of things that screw up a lot of stuff. And I understand it, right? So it's like, you a sinner? Yes. And I am so happy that God loves a sinner who turns around and goes like, I'm screwed up. I'm a sinner. Help me. And when you walk along with that path, you will get help. And right now, boy, do we need help. And I'm reminded, so I don't have anything in front of me, but I'm reminded in my head of the latter days that talked about all life would be killed, all flesh would be killed if it wasn't for the days shortened, and he did it for the elect's sake. God is intervening in life out of love for those who loves him. And because of that, everyone gets a chance to join that club. So the people who are praying and keeping the lights on, if you will, in this entropic universe, are allowing that time frame to continue. And I would just encourage you. You can probably get them anywhere now online. Books on tape. I like the NASB version. I personally prefer the Red Jeffries author, person who reads, only because it was the first one I had and I got used to his voice. But the NASB version, I think, is painstakingly accurate in terms of linguistics. Other ones sound nicer or easier. I'm not criticizing them. I'm just saying that I prefer that one because I can look at it, look at the words, look them up, look at the Greek and Hebrew, get it deeper. Easier to narrow it down because of the way they do it. But get a New Testament, look at the red letters, read them if you got a reader. I mean, I'm sure you can get like the King James for like nothing if you have a Kindle. Probably get online, it's probably there. And, there's probably red letter editions. It makes it easier just to be able to find the red letters. But read it. Don't worry about the narratives, about the story of childhood and all this stuff. Read about what Jesus says. That's what I would focus on. I'm not discounting anything else. I'm saying, and right to me in my heart right now, we need what Jesus taught right now, hugely, because of where we're at in what's happening in this world. With the encroachment of the physical entropy, with the spiritual negative entropy coming from evil, with the way that we're being manipulated politically, economically, and all this stuff. We need to know those things and help one another. I'm going to go, and I will see you again next time. Nature One, my old friend. I listen to this song every day. It's a gift, like from me to God, and a gift from me to God. From God and to God.
Oh, my old friend, the one who walked before, the one who walked again, the ancient one of old, with wisdom for the new, revive our inner sight, retell your timeless truths, oh, ancient one.
Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the OnSync Radio network of stations.